I want a divorce.
A divorce? Where is this coming from? I haven't done anything wrong.
That's not the point.
Chinedu Okafor was one of the most powerful billionaires in Lagos. One night, he asked his quiet wife Amara for a divorce, believing she depended on his wealth. But he had no idea. The woman he was leaving secretly owned everything. And if you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to like and subscribe. Chinedu Okafor was one of the richest businessmen in Lagos. At 42 years old, he owned Okafor Tech Group, a company that built digital security systems used by banks, companies, and even government offices across Africa. People admired him everywhere he went. His face appeared on business magazines and news programs. Many young entrepreneurs looked up to him and wanted to become successful like him. Wherever Chinedu went, cameras followed him. And standing beside him at every big event was his wife, Amara. Amara Okafor was calm, beautiful, and quiet. She did not talk much in public, and she never tried to take attention away from her husband. Many people believed she was just enjoying the rich life her husband had created. They lived in a large luxury house in Banana Island, drove expensive cars, and traveled to beautiful countries every year. To the outside world, their marriage looked perfect. But inside the marriage, something had slowly started to change. Chinedu began to believe that Amara was too quiet and simple. At business parties, people gathered around him to talk about deals and investments while Amara stood quietly beside him, smiling politely. Chinedu started thinking she did not understand business at all. Over time, he convinced himself that Amara depended completely on him. What he did not know was that Amara noticed everything. She listened carefully when investors talked. She understood the business discussions more than anyone realized. She simply chose not to speak about it. Amara had always believed that power did not need to be loud. Sometimes the strongest people are the quiet ones. But Chinedu never asked what she did during the day while he worked. He simply assumed she stayed home spending his money. Slowly, his respect for her began to fade. His conversations with her became shorter. Sometimes during dinner, he barely looked at her. Amara noticed every change in his behavior, but she never argued with him. She simply watched quietly as his confidence slowly turned into pride. And pride can make a person blind to the truth standing right in front of them. Very soon, Chinedu Okafor would discover that the quiet woman he underestimated was far more powerful than he ever imagined. Every morning after Chinedu left for work, Amara started her own routine. When the house became quiet, she walked into a private room hidden behind a wooden wall in their home. Inside the room were computers, financial screens, and secure communication systems connected to investment markets around the world. Very few people knew this room existed. Amara did not spend her days shopping like many people believed. Instead, she managed a network of companies and investments spread across different countries. Years before she married Chinedu, Amara had already started investing in technology companies, real estate projects, and renewable energy businesses. She had a special talent for spotting opportunities early. While other investors waited until businesses became popular, Amara invested when the companies were still small and unknown. Over time, those small investments grew into massive successes. Several startups she had supported became major international companies. But Amara never attached her personal name to those businesses. She used holding companies and private investment groups to keep everything quiet. She preferred working in the background where nobody would notice her influence. By the time she married Chinedu 12 years earlier, Amara was already extremely wealthy. But she never talked about it. She allowed people to believe whatever they wanted. Even Chinedu never knew the full truth about her financial power. For Amara, money was not about showing off or proving anything to others. It was about freedom and long-term planning. Every day she studied markets, managed investments, and made careful decisions that slowly increased her wealth. While the world celebrated Chinedu as a genius businessman, Amara quietly built an empire of her own. And the most surprising part was that some of her investments were connected to companies Chinedu himself depended on. But he had never noticed. Inside Okafor Tech Group, a new employee had recently joined the company. Her name was Adiz Nwoy. Adiz was young, confident, and very ambitious. She worked as Chinedu's executive assistant, and she quickly learned how to get his attention. Adiz always praised Chinidu's ideas. She told him he was the smartest businessman she had ever met. She laughed at his jokes and admired every decision he made. After long meetings, she would stay behind to help organize documents and discuss business strategies with him. Chinidu began to enjoy these conversations more and more. Adiz made him feel important and powerful. She told him he deserved more excitement in his life. Slowly, their professional relationship began to feel more personal. They started having private dinners after work to discuss business ideas. In the office, people began to notice how close they had become. Some employees whispered about it quietly, but nobody dared to question the boss. Meanwhile, at home, Amara noticed something changing in her husband's behavior. He stayed out later than usual. He checked his phone during dinner. Sometimes he smiled at messages and quickly locked the screen. Amara did not ask questions. She simply observed everything carefully. She had always believed that the truth reveals itself with time. What Chinidu did not understand was that every decision he was making was slowly leading him toward a mistake that would change his life forever. And when that moment finally came, he would realize that the quiet wife he believed he controlled was actually the one holding all the power. As the weeks passed, Chinidu became more distant at home. He spent longer hours at the office and returned late at night. When Amara tried to talk to him during dinner, he often answered with short replies. Sometimes he barely listened. In his mind, he had already started imagining a different life. Adiz's constant praise made him feel young and important again. She told him he deserved someone who truly understood his world. Slowly, those words began to grow in his mind. One evening after work, Chinidu sat alone in his office looking at the city lights of Lagos through the large glass window. Adiz had just left after another long meeting, and her words were still in his head. She had told him he looked unhappy in his marriage. She had said a man like him deserved more excitement in life. For the first time, Chinidu began seriously thinking about divorce. The idea felt bold and frightening at the same time, but the more he thought about it, the more convinced he became that it was the right decision. In his mind, Amara had become too quiet, too simple, and too far removed from his world of business and power. He convinced himself that their marriage had simply reached its end. What he did not realize was that Amara had already noticed the changes in his behavior. She saw the distance in his eyes and the cold tone in his voice. But she never argued with him. Instead, she stayed calm and continued her daily routine as if nothing was wrong. Amara understood something Chinidu did not. People often reveal their true intentions when they believe they are in control. And Chinidu was about to reveal everything. One evening Chinidu came home earlier than usual. The house was quiet, and Amara was sitting in the living room reading a book. The soft lights of the room reflected off the glass walls that showed the city skyline outside. Chinidu stood in front of her for a moment without speaking. Amara slowly closed her book and looked up at him calmly. His face looked serious, almost cold. After a few seconds of silence, he finally spoke. He told her he thought it was time for them to separate. He said their marriage was no longer working and that it would be better for both of them to move on with their lives. His voice sounded firm, as if he had already made up his mind long before walking into the room. Amara listened quietly without interrupting him. She did not look surprised. Instead, she studied his face carefully as he explained that he would arrange everything with his lawyers. He told her she would receive a generous settlement and would not have to worry about money. In his mind, he believed he was being fair and even kind. After he finished speaking, the room became silent again. Amara looked at him for a long moment before asking only one question. She asked if he was completely sure about his decision. Chinidu answered quickly and confidently that he was sure. He believed this would be a simple process. After all, he was the billionaire who owned the company and controlled the wealth. Amara nodded slowly and said they could handle the matter legally. Her calm reaction confused him slightly, but he pushed the thought aside. He believed everything was under his control. But what Chinidu did not realize was that this moment had just started a chain of events that would soon shock him more than anything in his life. The next morning Chinidu left the house feeling confident about his decision. He called his lawyers and asked them to begin preparing the divorce documents immediately. They assured him the process would be straightforward. From their perspective, the situation looked simple. Chinedu Okafor was a billionaire businessman, while his wife appeared to have no known businesses or financial power of her own. The lawyers expected the divorce to end with a settlement that would allow Amara to live comfortably while Chinedu kept control of his company and wealth. Meanwhile at home, Amara began making her own quiet preparations. After Chinedu left, she walked into her private office and turned on the financial screens. She opened several secure files and began reviewing documents that showed the true size of her investments. Over the years, she had built an enormous network of companies, trusts, and international holdings. Some of them controlled large real estate projects across Africa. Others owned shares in technology companies and energy businesses around the world. She then made a phone call to a lawyer who had worked with her for many years. He already knew the full truth about her financial empire. When he heard that Chinedu had asked for a divorce, he was not surprised. He simply asked one important question. He asked if she was ready to reveal everything. Amara paused for a moment before answering. She said not yet. She wanted Chinedu to make the first move in court. Her lawyer understood exactly what she meant. Sometimes the most powerful strategy is patience. By the time the legal battle officially began, the truth about Amara's wealth would come out piece by piece. And when that moment finally arrived, Chinedu Okafor would realize that the quiet woman he thought depended on him was actually far richer and far more powerful than he had ever imagined. A few days later, Chinedu's lawyers officially filed the divorce papers in court. For Chinedu, it felt like the final step towards starting a new chapter of his life. He was confident the process would be quick and simple. His legal team prepared a detailed report of his assets to present during the proceedings. The documents listed everything he owned: Okafor Tech Group, luxury houses in Lagos and Abuja, expensive cars, investment accounts, and shares in several companies. When the numbers were added together, the total value of his wealth was estimated at more than $3 billion. His lawyers believed this strong financial position would give him complete control of the divorce negotiations. From their perspective, Amara had never worked publicly in business, so they assumed she had no significant assets. They prepared an offer that would give her a comfortable settlement and allow Chinedu to keep ownership of most of his empire. When Amara received the divorce documents, she read them quietly without showing any emotion. She then passed them to her lawyer, who carefully reviewed every page. Instead of arguing immediately, Amara simply instructed him to prepare their response and submit it at the right time. Days later, both legal teams met in a conference room to begin the early stages of the case. Chinedu arrived confident and relaxed, believing the process would be nothing more than a formality. Amara arrived calm and silent, just as she always had been. But when her lawyer placed a thick folder of documents on the table, the atmosphere in the room changed instantly. The folder contained financial records that no one in Chinedu's legal team had expected to see. And those documents were about to reveal the first piece of a truth that would shake everyone in the room. Amara's lawyer slowly opened the folder and began presenting the documents one by one. At first, Chinedu barely paid attention. He assumed the papers were simply part of the normal legal process. But then he heard something that immediately caught his attention. The lawyer began listing several international companies connected to Amara through investment groups and holding firms. Each company had financial statements showing millions of dollars in revenue. As the list continued, the numbers grew larger. Real estate developments in Dubai, technology startups in Europe, energy companies in West Africa, investment funds in the United States. Chinedu frowned as he listened. He had never heard Amara speak about owning any businesses. The lawyer then presented a summary document showing the estimated total value of these holdings. The number written on the page made the entire room fall silent. Amara's personal investment network was worth nearly $9 billion. Chinedu stared at the document in disbelief. He thought it had to be some kind of mistake. He asked his lawyers to check the records immediately. But after reviewing the documents carefully, they realized everything was legally verified. The companies existed, the investments were real, and the ownership records clearly connected them to Amara through several private holding corporations. For the first time since the divorce process began, Chinedu felt uncertainty. The quiet wife he believed depended on his money was suddenly revealed to be far wealthier than he was. But the shock was not over yet, because among the many documents in the folder was one particular record that would change everything Chinedu thought he knew about his own company. As the meeting continued, Amara's lawyer calmly explained how her investment empire had grown over the years. Long before marrying Chinedu, she had begun placing small but strategic investments in emerging industries. She believed technology, renewable energy, and digital security would become some of the most important sectors in the future. While many investors ignored these young companies, Amara supported them early when their value was still low. Over time, those companies grew into powerful global businesses. Her strategy was simple but effective. She invested early, remained patient, and allowed the companies to grow for many years before revealing her involvement. Because she used private holding companies to manage these investments, her name rarely appeared in public records. That privacy allowed her to move quietly through the financial world without attracting attention. Chinedu listened as the lawyer explained these details, and slowly he began to understand something frightening. Amara had been building her financial empire during the entire time they had been married. While he focused on growing Okafor Tech Group, she had been growing something even larger behind the scenes. But the most surprising revelation was still coming. One final document remained in the folder. When the lawyer placed it on the table, Chinedu leaned forward to read it carefully. What he saw on that page made his heart stop for a moment. The document showed that Amara owned a large share of Okafor Tech Group itself, his own company. And according to the records, her share was large enough to give her serious influence over the entire business. At that moment, Chinedu realized something that made him feel colder than ever before. The woman he had just asked for a divorce might actually have the power to control the empire he believed belonged only to him. The room remained silent as Chinedu stared at the document in front of him. At the top of the page was the official ownership record of Okafor Tech Group. Beneath the company name were the names of the major shareholders and the percentage of shares each one owned. Chinedu already knew most of the names on the list. They were investors, banks, and venture capital groups that had supported the company during its early years. But one name stood out in a way he had never noticed before. It was a private holding company called Amani Global Holdings. Next to that name was a number that made Chinedu's stomach tighten, 27%. That meant the company was the largest single shareholder in Okafor Tech Group. Chinedu had always assumed the holding company belonged to a foreign investment group. But Amara's lawyer calmly explained the truth. Amani Global Holdings was controlled entirely by Amara. Years earlier, when Okafor Tech Group was still growing and needed outside investment, Amara had quietly purchased shares through that holding company. At the time, Chinedu had been too busy expanding the company to investigate every investor in detail. He had simply welcomed the funding and moved forward. Over the years, as the company became more successful, the value of those shares increased dramatically. Now those shares represented billions of dollars and enormous influence over the company's future. Chinedu felt a wave of disbelief. The company he believed he controlled completely now had a silent partner he had never truly noticed. And that partner was the same woman he had just asked to divorce. For the first time since the meeting began, Chinedu looked directly at Amara. She remained calm and quiet, just as she always had been. But now he understood something he had never realized before. Her silence had never meant weakness. It had meant patience. News of the situation did not stay secret for long. Within days, rumors began spreading inside Okafor Tech Group. Employees whispered about the divorce and the shocking discovery that Amara owned a massive share of the company. Some people refused to believe it at first. To them, Amara had always seemed like the quiet wife who occasionally attended company events and charity dinners. But when financial records began circulating among senior executives, the truth became impossible to ignore. The largest shareholder of Okafor Tech Group was not an international investment firm as many had believed. It was Amara Okafor. Inside the executive offices, tension quickly began to grow. Senior managers wondered what this meant for the future of the company. If the divorce turned hostile, the leadership of the entire organization could be affected. Meanwhile, Adiz Nwoy began to feel the pressure more than anyone else. She had enjoyed her growing influence around Chinedu and had imagined a future where she would stand beside him as his new partner. But the situation was suddenly changing in ways she had not expected. Investors started asking questions. Some board members requested urgent meetings to understand the situation. The story was quickly becoming too big to hide. For the first time since starting the divorce process, Chinedu realized that the issue was no longer just personal. It was now a business crisis that could affect the entire company. And at the center of that crisis was the quiet woman everyone had underestimated. A week later, the board of directors called an emergency meeting at the headquarters of Okafor Tech Group. The meeting room was filled with senior executives, investors, and board members who wanted clear answers about the company's ownership and future leadership. Chinedu sat at the head of the table as the founder and CEO, but the confidence he once carried into every meeting was no longer as strong. For years he had controlled every important discussion in that room. But today felt different. When the doors opened again, everyone turned their heads. Amara walked into the boardroom for the first time as an official shareholder. The room became completely silent as she calmly took a seat at the table. Many of the executives looked surprised. They had never seen her attend a business meeting before. Some of them were unsure how to react. But the documents in front of them made one fact clear. Amara owned one of the largest shares in the company. The meeting began with discussions about the divorce and the ownership structure of Okafor Tech Group. Investors wanted to know whether the conflict between Chinedu and Amara could affect the stability of the business. For the first time, Amara began to speak openly about the company. She explained several long-term strategies, market trends, and financial risks that the company would face in the coming years. As she spoke, something surprising happened. The executives in the room slowly realized that Amara understood the company's operations deeply. Her analysis was clear, detailed, and thoughtful. Some board members began nodding in agreement with her points. Chinedu watched silently as the room's attention slowly shifted away from him and toward the woman he had always believed knew nothing about business. In that moment, he began to understand something that made him deeply uneasy. The balance of power inside Okafor Tech Group was beginning to change. And the quiet woman he once ignored was now becoming the most important voice in the room. After the boardroom meeting, the atmosphere inside Okafor Tech Group changed in a way no one had expected. For years, Chinedu had been the unquestioned leader of the company. His decisions were rarely challenged, and most executives followed his direction without hesitation. But now the situation was different. Investors had started paying closer attention to Amara. During the meeting, she had spoken calmly and clearly about market risks, expansion opportunities, and long-term financial strategies. Her ideas were practical and well thought out, and many board members were impressed. Some even admitted privately that her understanding of the industry was deeper than they had expected. Slowly, conversations among investors began to shift. Instead of asking only for Chinedu's opinion, they also wanted to hear Amara's perspective. This quiet change in attention made Chinedu uncomfortable. For the first time in years, he felt like he was losing control of the narrative around his own company. Meanwhile, Amara did not try to compete with him openly. She continued behaving the same way she always had, calm, patient, and thoughtful. She attended meetings only when necessary and spoke only when she had something important to say. But every time she spoke, people listened carefully. The board members also began reviewing the company's ownership structure more closely. They realized that with her 27% share, Amara had enormous influence over major decisions. In some cases, her vote could determine the direction of the company's future. Chinedu started to feel a pressure he had never experienced before. The empire he believed he fully controlled was suddenly no longer his alone. It did not take long for the story to reach the public. One business journalist discovered details about the divorce case and the shocking ownership records connected to Amara. Within hours, the story spread across news websites and social media platforms. Headlines appeared everywhere. Many of them described the situation in dramatic terms. Billionaire CEO files for divorce. Then learns his wife is richer. Another headline read, the silent shareholder behind Okafor Tech Group. Television networks began discussing the story on business programs. Commentators were fascinated by the situation. For years the public had known Chinedu Okafor as the brilliant businessman behind the company. But now people were discovering that his quiet wife had secretly built an even larger financial empire. Social media exploded with opinions and speculation. Some people praised Amara's intelligence and patience. Others criticized Chinedu for underestimating his own wife. Interviews with market analysts suggested that investors might even feel more confident knowing someone like Amara was involved in the company's leadership. The unexpected attention placed enormous pressure on Chinedu. Every time he walked into the office, employees looked at him differently. Journalists waited outside the building hoping for a comment. For the first time since building his company, Chinedu felt like the story was no longer about his success. Instead, the world had become fascinated with the quiet woman who had stood beside him all those years without revealing her true power. While the media focused on the business drama, another problem was quietly growing inside Chinedu's personal life. Adiz began to feel nervous about the situation. When their relationship had started, she believed Chinedu was an unstoppable billionaire whose power and influence would continue growing. But now his reputation was under pressure, and the company's future leadership had become uncertain. Investors were paying more attention to Amara, and some board members had started discussing possible changes in management if the divorce conflict affected the company's stability. Adiz slowly realized that the man she had attached herself to might not be as secure as she once believed. Her behavior toward Chinedu began to change. She was no longer as enthusiastic or supportive as before. Sometimes she avoided private conversations with him, focusing instead on her own career opportunities. Chinedu noticed the difference immediately. The excitement and admiration she once showed him had faded. One afternoon he overheard two employees whispering about the situation in the hallway. They were discussing how Adiz might leave the company if the leadership changed. Hearing this made Chinedu feel a deep sense of frustration. In just a few weeks, everything around him had started falling apart. His marriage was ending, his company's leadership was being questioned, and the woman who had encouraged his decision to divorce now seemed ready to disappear when things became difficult. Meanwhile, Amara continued focusing calmly on the legal process and the company's future. She never insulted Chinedu publicly and never tried to embarrass him in the media. But her quiet strength was becoming more visible every day. And Chinedu was slowly realizing that the greatest mistake of his life had not been the divorce itself. His greatest mistake had been underestimating the woman he thought he knew better than anyone else. As the tension inside Okafor Tech Group continued to grow, the board of directors decided they needed to protect the stability of the company. Investors were watching closely, and the media attention surrounding the divorce was creating uncertainty in the market. To calm the situation, the board scheduled another important meeting. This meeting would focus on leadership and the long-term direction of the company. Chinedu arrived at the meeting determined to prove he was still the best person to lead the business he had built from the beginning. 4 years he had guided the company through difficult challenges, and he believed the board would remember that history. But when the meeting began, it quickly became clear that many directors were thinking carefully about the future. They wanted leadership that could bring stability and confidence to investors. During the meeting, several board members spoke about the importance of strategic planning, financial discipline, and strong governance. Amara also attended the meeting as one of the largest shareholders. She listened quietly while others discussed the company's situation. When she finally spoke, she focused on the company's long-term growth and explained several ideas for expanding into new international markets. Her calm and thoughtful approach impressed many people in the room. After hours of discussion, the board moved to a vote about leadership roles within the company. Chinedu expected to maintain full control, just as he always had. But when the votes were counted, the results surprised him. The board announced that Amara would become the new chairperson of the board, giving her strong influence over major decisions and the company's direction. Chinedu remained CEO for the moment, but it was clear that the balance of power had changed. For the first time since creating Okafor Tech Group, Chinedu realized he was no longer the most powerful person in the company. That evening Chinedu sat alone in his office long after most employees had gone home. The lights of Lagos shined through the large windows as he looked down at the busy streets below. His mind replayed everything that had happened over the past few weeks. The divorce, the financial documents, the board meetings, the media headlines. It all felt unreal. For years he had believed he understood the people around him, especially Amara. He thought he knew her completely. He believed she was quiet because she depended on him. Now he realized how wrong that assumption had been. Amara had never needed his money or his status. While he was busy building his company and enjoying public praise, she had been quietly building something even bigger. Her patience, intelligence, and discipline had allowed her to grow a financial empire without attracting attention. Chinedu also began to see another painful truth. Amara had never tried to compete with him or embarrass him publicly. Even now, she was handling the situation with calm professionalism. The conflict between them existed mostly because of his own pride and poor judgment. Thinking about this made him feel a deep sense of regret. If he had respected her more and taken time to understand her abilities, their story might have been very different. But now the situation had already moved too far forward to change. Several weeks later, the divorce negotiations finally reached their final stage. Both legal teams met to settle the remaining details. By now the entire business community knew about the situation between Chinedu and Amara. What had started as a private decision had turned into one of the most talked about corporate stories in the country. Despite everything that had happened, Amara did not try to destroy Chinedu financially or take unnecessary revenge. Her lawyer focused only on fair legal arrangements and the protection of her existing investments. The final settlement allowed both of them to separate their personal lives while maintaining clear professional boundaries within the company. Amara kept control of her large investment network and remained a major shareholder of Okafor Tech Group. Her new position as chairperson ensured she would play a key role in guiding the company's future strategy. Chinedu continued working as CEO, but he now had to operate within a structure that involved stronger oversight from the board. When the final documents were signed, the marriage that had lasted 12 years officially came to an end. As Amara left the legal office that day, she felt calm and focused on the future. She had never wanted a public battle or unnecessary drama. Her priority had always been building something meaningful and lasting. Meanwhile, Chinedu stood quietly for a moment after the meeting ended. He understood that his life had changed permanently. The woman he once believed lived under his shadow had walked away not only stronger, but also more powerful than he had ever imagined. And the world now knew the truth. Chapter 19. The Fall of a Billionaire. In the months that followed the divorce, life changed quickly for Chinedu Okafor. Although he remained the CEO of Okafor Tech Group, things no longer felt the same. The confidence and admiration he once enjoyed everywhere he went had slowly faded. Investors watched him more carefully now, and every decision he made was closely examined by the board. The media continued discussing the story for weeks. Many business programs analyzed how one of the country's most famous billionaires had underestimated the person closest to him. Some commentators said the situation showed the danger of arrogance in leadership. Others praised Amara's intelligence and patience. Inside the company, employees also began seeing things differently. In the past, Chinedu had been viewed as the sole mastermind behind the company's success. But now people understood that another powerful mind had been quietly connected to the business all along. Meanwhile, Adiz Nwoy eventually resigned from the company. When the public attention and internal pressure grew too intense, she decided to pursue opportunities elsewhere. Her sudden departure made Chinedu realize how temporary some relationships can be. The person who once encouraged him to leave his marriage had disappeared as soon as the situation became difficult. Chinedu spent many evenings alone in his office thinking about everything that had happened. He began to understand that success in business does not always mean success in life. Wealth and power can sometimes create pride, and pride can lead to decisions that cannot be undone. For the first time in many years, Chinedu began focusing less on public praise and more on rebuilding his personal character. The experience had humbled him in a way nothing else ever had. While Chinedu worked quietly to rebuild his reputation, Amara moved forward with confidence and purpose. As chairperson of Okafor Tech Group, she focused on strengthening the company's long-term strategy. Her leadership style was calm and thoughtful. Instead of making loud public announcements, she preferred careful planning and steady growth. Investors soon realized that the company remained stable under her influence. In fact, several new partnerships and expansion projects began developing under her guidance. Outside the company, Amara also dedicated more time to projects she truly cared about. She invested in educational programs for young entrepreneurs and supported technology training centers for students across Nigeria. Many young people began seeing her as an inspiration, a woman who had achieved extraordinary success without seeking attention or recognition. Interviews with business magazines soon followed, and people were curious to learn more about her story. When journalists asked how she managed to build such a powerful financial empire quietly for so many years, Amara gave a simple answer. She explained that patience, discipline, and humility are often stronger than loud ambition. She said many people underestimate quiet individuals because they mistake silence for weakness. But sometimes the quiet ones are simply observing, learning, and preparing for the right moment. Her story became a powerful lesson in both business and life. The world had once believed she was just the wife of a billionaire. But in the end, the truth was far more surprising. The quiet woman standing beside the billionaire had been the one who owned everything all along.